In the cabin, Emma Richardson observed the boarding completion with professional interest. Her count matched the manifest, 137 passengers plus crew. Her psychological profiling of immediate threats had identified 3 individuals requiring continued monitoring. The man in the bull's jacket remained her primary concern, but 2 other passengers had exhibited behavioral anomalies worthy of attention. Seat 22 it contained a woman in her 20s who had spent an unusual amount of time in the forward lavatory before takeoff, longer than typical for standard restroom needs, but consistent with someone concealing contraband or establishing communication with external contacts. Her nervous energy seemed authentic rather than performative, but Emma had learned never to dismiss possibilities based on apparent emotional states. In seat 31B, an elderly gentleman was reading a newspaper with excessive focus, his eyes tracking individual words rather than scanning for information. Additionally, his choice of publication was curious, a financial daily in what appeared to be Arabic text, despite his appearance suggesting European ancestry. The disconnect might be innocent, but Emma's training had taught her to catalog inconsistencies. As Flight 447 taxied toward the active runway, Detective Martinez in Miami was receiving disturbing intelligence from federal agencies. The Joint Terrorism Task Force had identified potential coordination between the 4 individuals flagged at O'Hare and a larger network of persons of interest across multiple airports. "Sarah, you need to see this," Detective Morrison called from her workstation, her voice carrying an urgency that made Martinez immediately abandon her coffee and cross the security office. On Morrison's screen was a comprehensive threat assessment compiled by the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. The 4 men identified at O'Hare were not random travelers. They were part of a sophisticated operation that intelligence agencies had been tracking for 8 months, ever since intercepted communications had revealed plans for coordinated attacks on American transportation infrastructure. "The pattern analysis is terrifying," Morrison explained, pointing to a complex diagram showing travel routes, timing correlations, and communication intersections. "They're calling it Operation Crosswind. Multiple cells, multiple targets, designed to overwhelm response capabilities by creating simultaneous incidents." Martinez studied the information with growing alarm. "What about our passenger? The woman in 12C on Flight 447? Morrison pulled up additional screens showing enhanced background checks that went far beyond standard security databases. "Emma Richardson doesn't exist beyond 18 months ago. The identity was professionally constructed, but her background prior to that is completely dark. Either she's running from something very serious, or she's running towards something," Martinez finished, understanding the implications. "Get me a direct line to that aircraft. Now." But Flight 447 was already airborne, climbing through 10,000 feet into the night sky above Lake Michigan. Captain Torres had executed a textbook takeoff, and her passengers were settling into the routine of short-haul flight. Reading lights illuminated books and tablets, flight attendants began beverage service, and the cabin gradually assumed the quiet hum of routine air travel. Emma Richardson appeared to doze, her head tilted against the window, but her awareness remained acute. Through half-closed eyelids, she monitored the 3 individuals who had triggered her concern. The man in the bull's jacket had made 2 trips to the lavatory in 30 minutes, excessive for a short flight and potentially indicating nervousness or communication needs. The young woman in 22 was checking her phone every few minutes despite the prohibition on cellular usage during flight, behavior suggesting she was expecting important contact. Most concerning was the elderly gentleman with the Arabic newspaper. His reading pattern had shifted from careful text scanning to repetitive page turning without apparent comprehension. Classic anxiety behavior, but his specific type of nervousness suggested operational rather than travel-related stress. Emma's training had prepared her for dozens of scenarios, but the current configuration of potential threats was troubling. Multiple individuals exhibiting suspicious behavior on a single flight could indicate several possibilities: coincidental nervousness among unrelated passengers, a coordinated operation in progress, or a diversionary tactic designed to mask a different objective entirely. In the cockpit, Captain Torres was receiving an unusual communication from air traffic control. Delta 447, this is Chicago Center. We're receiving a priority message from ground security. Request you stand by for instructions. Torres exchanged glances with First Officer Kim. Priority security messages during routine flights were rare and typically indicated serious concerns. Chicago Center, Delta 447 standing by. The response came through on a secure channel that Torres had hoped never to use in commercial aviation. Delta 447, this is Homeland Security Operations Center. Be advised you may have persons of interest aboard your aircraft. Maintain normal flight operations but heighten crew awareness. Do not acknowledge this transmission over standard communications. Torres felt her pulse elevate slightly, but her training kicked in immediately. 15 years of commercial flying, plus 8 years of military transport operations, had prepared her for crisis management. She activated the discrete alert system that would notify her cabin crew of potential security concerns without alarming passengers. James, run through emergency procedures in your head, she instructed her first officer quietly. Don't touch anything, don't change any settings, just refresh your memory on security protocols. Kim nodded, understanding the gravity of unspoken implications. His military background had included scenarios involving hostile passengers and aircraft security breaches. While he hoped such training would never be necessary in civilian aviation, he appreciated having the knowledge. In the cabin, Senior Flight Attendant Maria Santos received the captain's discreet alert and began implementing enhanced observation protocols. With 22 years of flight experience, including service on international routes through high-risk regions, Santos had developed exceptional skill at identifying problem passengers while maintaining service normalcy. She initiated casual contact with each passenger section, offering additional beverages and snacks while systematically cataloging behaviors, seating positions, and potential security concerns. Her experienced eye confirmed several of the same individuals that had caught Emma Richardson's attention, plus 2 additional passengers whose demeanor suggested elevated stress levels. Santos had no way of knowing that one of those passengers, Emma Richardson herself, was conducting an identical assessment from her position in row 12. Their shared professional awareness created an interesting dynamic, 2 trained observers, each monitoring the same environment, each drawing similar conclusions about potential threats. The emergency alarm screamed through Terminal 4 of Miami International Airport at 11:47 p.m., but Detective Sarah Martinez barely registered the sound. After 18 years working airport security, she had heard them all. False alarms triggered by nervous passengers, medical emergencies, suspicious packages that turned out to be forgotten laptops. But as she reviewed the security footage from Gate B23, something cold settled in her stomach that had nothing to do with the late-night coffee she'd been nursing. From which corner of the world are you watching this story unfold tonight? If tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances intrigue you, please consider joining our community of storytellers and truth seekers by subscribing. What Detective Martinez was about to discover would challenge everything she thought she knew about the invisible guardians who walk among us. The footage showed passengers boarding Flight 447, a red-eye Delta connection bound for Chicago O'Hare. Nothing unusual at first glance. Business travelers with laptops, families with sleepy children, college students with overstuffed backpacks. Standard late-night crowd trying to catch the last flight out. But Martinez had learned to read between the frames, to spot the anomalies that others missed. She rewound the tape, studying passenger faces as they passed through the boarding gate. Her trained eye cataloged the usual suspects, the nervous first-time flyer checking his boarding pass repeatedly, the frequent traveler who moved with practiced efficiency, the elderly couple arguing about carry-on restrictions. Then she saw her. Row 12, middle section. A woman in her early 30s with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Navy blazer, dark jeans, comfortable walking shoes. She carried a small canvas messenger bag and moved with unremarkable purpose. But something about her posture triggered Martinez's instincts. Too aware. Too controlled. The way her eyes swept the boarding area wasn't casual observation, it was systematic threat assessment. "Janet, pull up passenger manifest for Flight 447, Martinez called to her partner across the security office. "I need identification on seat 12C. Detective Janet Morrison, a 10-year veteran with an encyclopedic knowledge of frequent flyer databases, pulled up the information within seconds. Emma Richardson, age 31, originating from Fort Lauderdale. Clean record, no watch lists, TSA pre-check approved. Marketing consultant according to her employment verification." "Why, what caught your attention?" Martinez couldn't articulate it yet. Years of experience had taught her to trust her gut when something felt off, even when she couldn't identify the specific trigger. Professional curiosity. "Keep that footage accessible, will you?" What Detective Martinez didn't know was that 847 miles away, at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, another security professional was having similar concerns about entirely different passengers. Agent Michael Chen of the Transportation Security Administration had flagged 4 individuals during routine screening who had passed all standard protocols but exhibited behavioral patterns that troubled him. Chen had spent 12 years in airport security, including 3 years as a federal air marshal before transitioning to ground-based operations. His experience aboard commercial flights had given him insights that most TSA agents lacked. He understood how genuine passengers behaved versus those with alternative agendas. The 4 men who had caught his attention weren't traveling together, at least not officially. They had arrived at different times, used different security checkpoints, and were booked on different flights. But Chen noticed the subtle coordination. The way they positioned themselves to maintain visual contact across the terminal. The identical timing of their bathroom breaks. The synchronized departure toward their respective gates. 2 were boarding flights to Miami. 1 was headed to Los Angeles. The 4th was catching a connection to Denver. Different destinations, but all departing within a 30-minute window. Chen had seen this pattern before in advanced anti-terrorism training scenarios. Cell coordination disguised as coincidental travel. He activated his secure communication device and initiated a priority alert to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Within minutes, his concerns were being evaluated by analysts who specialized in pattern recognition and threat assessment. What they discovered in the subsequent database cross-reference would set in motion a chain of events that nobody could have anticipated. Meanwhile, aboard Flight 447, Emma Richardson settled into her assigned seat and performed her standard pre-flight routine. To observers, she appeared to be reading a paperback thriller while occasionally checking her phone. In reality, she was conducting a comprehensive security assessment of every passenger within her line of sight. The businessman in 8A was genuinely absorbed in quarterly reports, his stress levels indicating authentic work pressure rather than operational nervousness. The mother in 14B was managing 2 restless children while simultaneously trying to finish a presentation on her laptop, classic multitasking behavior of a working parent, not a security threat. But 3 rows behind her, in seat 15F, a man in his 40s wearing a Chicago Bulls jacket was exhibiting micro-behaviors that concerned her. His breathing pattern was too controlled. His casual glances around the cabin were too systematic. When he adjusted his position, his movement suggested familiarity with concealed objects. Emma had been trained to identify threats that others missed. Her education hadn't come from law enforcement academies or military schools. Her instructors had been shadows within shadows, preparing her for situations that most people would never believe could exist. Captain Rebecca Torres began her final pre-flight checklist with the methodical precision that had kept her unblemished safety record intact for 15 years. Flight 447 was a routine domestic hop, the kind of run she could execute in her sleep. Chicago to Miami, 2 hours and 43 minutes of flying time, favorable weather conditions, experienced crew. Fuel loads confirmed, navigation systems verified, cabin pressure nominal, reported First Officer James Kim, her partner for the evening shift. Kim was relatively new to commercial aviation, having transitioned from military transport operations 6 months earlier, but his attention to detail impressed Torres. Ground crew reports passenger boarding complete, came the voice of Senior Flight Attendant Maria Santos through the intercom. 137 souls on board, cargo bay secured. Torres nodded, initiating the standard communication protocol with air traffic control. Chicago ground, Delta 447 requesting pushback clearance. Delta 447, you are cleared for pushback. Contact ground control on 121.9 when ready for taxi. As the aircraft began its slow reverse movement away from the gate, Torres scanned her instruments one final time. Everything appeared normal. Standard passenger load, routine flight path, typical late-night departure. She had no way of knowing that her aircraft was about to become the center of an international incident that would test every skill she had acquired in her aviation career. As Flight 447 continued its southward trajectory at 37,000 feet, multiple law enforcement agencies were coordinating response strategies. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force had established a command center in Miami to manage the developing situation, while similar operations were being activated in Chicago, Los Angeles, and Denver, the destinations of the 4 flagged individuals from O'Hare. Agent Patricia Donovan, a 15-year veteran of counterterrorism operations, was leading the Miami coordination effort. Her experience included successful interventions in 3 previous airline security incidents, giving her unique insight into the complexities of airborne threat management. Status report on Flight 447, she requested from her communications coordinator. Aircraft is 47 minutes from Miami International, maintaining normal flight profile. Crew has been discreetly alerted to potential security concerns. Ground response teams are positioning at MIA for immediate intervention upon landing. Donovan studied the passenger manifest, cross-referencing names against multiple databases and threat assessment algorithms. The mysterious Emma Richardson continued to generate questions rather than answers. Her background suggested professional identity construction, but the purpose remained unclear. Run deeper analysis on Richardson, Donovan instructed her intelligence team. Financial records, travel patterns, communication intercepts, employment verification. I want to know who she really is and why she's on that aircraft. Meanwhile, aboard Flight 447, Emma Richardson was reaching troubling conclusions about her fellow passengers. The coordination between the man in the bull's jacket and the elderly gentleman with the newspaper was becoming more apparent. Subtle hand signals, synchronized timing of movements, and shared glances suggested operational familiarity. But most concerning was a development she had not anticipated. The young woman in seat 22A was not exhibiting anxiety about travel or communication needs. Her behavioral pattern suggested she was monitoring the cabin just as systematically as Emma herself. Professional surveillance awareness, threat assessment scanning, and controlled positioning indicated training that civilian passengers should not possess. Emma realized she was not the only person aboard Flight 447 with specialized skills and hidden agendas. The question was whether the other trained individual represented an additional threat, a competing operation, or potentially an unknown ally in a situation that was becoming increasingly complex. Captain Torres received her next communication from Homeland Security as the aircraft passed over Tennessee airspace. Delta 447, be advised that ground analysis has identified additional persons of interest aboard your flight. Maintain normal operations but be prepared for potential instructions regarding emergency diversion. Emergency diversion protocols were among the most serious procedures in commercial aviation. They indicated threats significant enough to warrant landing at the nearest suitable airport regardless of passenger convenience or airline scheduling. Torres had executed emergency diversions twice in her career, once for a medical emergency, once for mechanical problems, but never for security concerns. James, review our diversion options, she instructed First Officer Kim. Nearest major airports, runway specifications, emergency response capabilities. Don't input anything into the navigation system yet, just refresh your knowledge. Kim began mental calculations of alternate airports within their current flight path. Jacksonville, Tampa, Fort Myers, multiple options depending on the nature of any emergency that might develop. His military experience reminded him that preparation was the key to successful crisis management. In the cabin, the atmosphere remained deceptively normal. Most passengers were sleeping, reading, or watching downloaded entertainment on personal devices. The cabin crew maintained regular service while discreetly observing the individuals who had been flagged as potential concerns. But Emma Richardson's professional assessment of the situation was becoming increasingly alarming. She had identified what appeared to be 5 separate individuals exhibiting behavior consistent with operational planning. 2 were clearly coordinating with each other. 1 was conducting surveillance. 1 was exhibiting pre-operational stress patterns. And 1 was showing signs of concealed equipment or weapons. The mathematical probability of 5 trained operatives being aboard a single domestic flight by coincidence was essentially 0. This was either a coordinated operation in progress or multiple competing operations, creating an unpredictable and dangerous situation. Emma quietly reached for her messenger bag and verified the status of certain items she hoped never to use aboard a commercial aircraft. Her training had prepared her for many scenarios, but a situation involving multiple potential threats in an enclosed environment at 37,000 feet presented challenges that would test every skill she had acquired. As Flight 447 crossed into Florida airspace, still 90 minutes from scheduled landing in Miami, the various players in this developing crisis were moving into position. Ground-based law enforcement agencies were coordinating response strategies, flight crew members were preparing for potential emergency procedures, and aboard the aircraft itself, multiple individuals with hidden agendas were calculating their next moves. Detective Martinez in Miami was monitoring communications from the aircraft while coordinating with federal agencies. Any updates on passenger Richardson's background investigation? Her partner Detective Morrison looked up from multiple computer screens. Still working on it, but we're getting some interesting correlations. Financial records show payments from consulting firms that don't appear to exist. Travel patterns include destinations that match locations of resolved international incidents over the past 18 months. Either she's incredibly unlucky with vacation timing, or she's professionally involved in situations that most people only read about in newspapers. Martinez nodded grimly. Keep digging. I have a feeling we're going to need every piece of information we can get before this night is over. Aboard Flight 447, Emma Richardson made her decision. The behavioral patterns she was observing suggested that action was imminent. The man in the bull's jacket had made 3 trips to the lavatory and was now positioning himself near the emergency exit. The elderly gentleman had folded his newspaper and was reaching toward his carry-on bag. The woman conducting surveillance was checking her watch with increasing frequency. Emma understood that she was about to face a situation that would require her to reveal capabilities that were supposed to remain hidden. Her cover identity as a marketing consultant was about to be tested in ways that no amount of preparation could fully anticipate. The next few minutes would determine whether Flight 447 continued its routine journey to Miami, or became the center of an incident that would challenge the skills of everyone involved, passengers, crew, and the law enforcement agencies tracking their progress from the ground. As the aircraft continued its descent toward Florida, carrying its cargo of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas through the night sky, none of the players in this unfolding drama could predict how dramatically their lives were about to change. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal truths some people had spent years trying to hide, and test the courage of ordinary individuals facing extraordinary circumstances. The calm woman in seat 12C prepared to show the world exactly who she really was. Emma Richardson's hand moved with practiced precision toward her messenger bag, but before she could reach it, the man in the bull's jacket stood abruptly. His movement wasn't casual, it was the controlled action of someone initiating a predetermined sequence. Around the cabin, Emma observed the subtle responses from other passengers she had been monitoring. The elderly gentleman's hand moved toward his carry-on. The young woman in 22A shifted her weight forward. The coordination was unmistakable. But then something unexpected happened that changed everything Emma thought she understood about the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." Captain Torres's voice carried a slight tension that experienced flyers might notice. We're experiencing a minor technical indicator that requires us to divert to Jacksonville International Airport as a precautionary measure. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for an unscheduled landing. Emma recognized the coded language immediately. This wasn't a mechanical diversion, it was a security intervention. But the timing was wrong. The suspicious passengers hadn't initiated any action yet, which meant ground control knew something that wasn't visible from her position in the cabin. The man in the bull's jacket, who Emma had designated as the primary threat, suddenly relaxed his posture and returned to his seat. His behavioral shift was so dramatic that it confirmed Emma's assessment of his training, but also suggested that the diversion had disrupted his operational timeline. Senior Flight Attendant Maria Santos began the standard diversion procedures, but Emma noticed how her eyes systematically scanned specific passengers, the same individuals Emma had been monitoring. The coordination between ground security and cabin crew was more sophisticated than typical airline protocols, suggesting that federal agencies were managing this situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Santos announced, "due to our diversion to Jacksonville, we'll be landing approximately 45 minutes earlier than our scheduled arrival in Miami. Ground transportation will be arranged for passengers continuing to Miami." Emma understood that no ground transportation would be arranged. This was a security intervention disguised as routine aircraft maintenance. The passengers exhibiting suspicious behavior would be quietly detained upon landing, questioned by federal agents, and either charged or released depending on what authorities discovered. But as Emma processed this development, she realized something troubling. Her own carefully constructed identity as Emma Richardson would not survive the type of background investigation that accompanied terrorist threat assessments. The federal agents waiting in Jacksonville would discover that her marketing consultant persona was professionally fabricated, which would lead to questions she was not prepared to answer publicly. In the cockpit, Captain Torres was receiving continuous updates from Homeland Security operations. Delta 447, be advised that ground teams are positioned at Jacksonville International. Upon landing, you will taxi to a secure area away from passenger terminals. Specialized response teams will board to conduct interviews. Understood, Torres replied, while privately hoping that her 15 years of commercial aviation had adequately prepared her for whatever was about to unfold. First Officer Kim was reviewing emergency procedures, though neither pilot could predict exactly what type of emergency they might face. "Rebecca," Kim said quietly, using her first name to indicate the informal nature of his comment, "in my military experience, when multiple agencies coordinate this extensively, the threat assessment is usually more serious than they communicate to flight crews." Torres nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. Keep running through security protocols, but also review our options if the situation becomes more complicated than a simple passenger interview process." Meanwhile, Agent Patricia Donovan in Miami was coordinating the Jacksonville intervention from her FBI command center. The analysis of Flight 447's passenger manifest had revealed concerning patterns that extended beyond the original 4 individuals flagged at O'Hare. Status report on background investigations, she requested from her intelligence team. Agent Michael Foster, a specialist in identity analysis, looked up from multiple computer screens. "We've identified at least 6 passengers whose backgrounds warrant additional scrutiny. But the most interesting case is Emma Richardson in seat 12C. Her identity appears to be professionally constructed, but the quality of the fabrication suggests government-level resources." Donovan studied the passenger photograph on her screen. Government resources could mean she's undercover law enforcement, intelligence operative, or someone running from law enforcement with access to sophisticated identity construction. "There's another possibility," Foster added. "The financial trail includes payments from companies that appear to be shell corporations for private military contractors. If she's corporate security or private intelligence, that would explain the quality of her background fabrication without indicating government employment." Donovan considered the implications. Private military contractors often employed former government operatives who maintained their skills while working for corporate clients. Such individuals could be assets or threats, depending on their current assignment and the nature of their presence aboard Flight 447. Aboard the aircraft, Emma was calculating her limited options. The diversion to Jacksonville meant she would face federal interrogation within 90 minutes. Her Emma Richardson identity would collapse under professional investigation, but revealing her true background would compromise operations that extended far beyond this single flight. She made a decision that would have surprised her former instructors at the facility where she had learned her specialized skills. Instead of preparing for confrontation or extraction, she decided to trust the federal agents coordinating this intervention. Emma quietly activated a communication device concealed within her messenger bag, not a standard cellular phone, but a secure satellite transmitter designed for emergency contact with her operational control center. She entered a specific code sequence that would alert her handlers to her situation and request immediate authentication support. Within minutes, her transmitter received a response that made her close her eyes in relief. Her control center was already coordinating with federal authorities. Her presence aboard Flight 447 was not coincidental. She had been positioned there specifically to monitor the same individuals that had attracted FBI attention. Emma Richardson was not her real name, but she was not a threat to the aircraft or its passengers. She was Anna Volkov, a former Russian intelligence operative who had been recruited by a joint NATO counterintelligence program 3 years earlier. Her mission aboard Flight 447 was to observe and report on suspected members of an international smuggling network that used commercial aviation to transport contraband across borders. The irony was perfect. FBI agents were preparing to detain her for suspicious behavior, while she had been conducting surveillance on behalf of their own allies. Anna activated her transmitter again, sending a priority message to her NATO control center requesting immediate authentication with FBI leadership. Within minutes, phones were ringing in federal command centers as intelligence agencies that rarely coordinated directly were suddenly forced to share information about overlapping operations. In Jacksonville, Agent Patricia Donovan received a call that made her question everything she thought she understood about Flight 447. Agent Donovan, this is Director Sarachin at NATO Counterintelligence. We need to discuss one of your passengers before you proceed with detention procedures. 20 minutes later, Donovan was studying classified documents that revealed the existence of operations she had never been briefed about. Anna Volkov was not only legitimate, she was an asset whose intelligence gathering had contributed to successful interdiction of 3 major international smuggling operations over the past 18 months. Director Chen, why wasn't the FBI informed about this operation in advance? Donovan asked. Operational security, Chen replied. The smuggling network we're targeting has demonstrated ability to intercept law enforcement communications. Ms. Volkov's mission required complete isolation from standard law enforcement channels. Donovan understood the logic but found herself frustrated by the complexity of interagency operations. What about the other passengers we've flagged as suspicious? According to Ms. Volkov's preliminary reports, at least 3 are confirmed members of the network she's been tracking. Her intelligence suggests they're transporting high-value contraband, possibly including weapons or explosive materials. The situation had transformed from a routine terrorist threat assessment to a complex international operation involving multiple intelligence agencies and criminal networks that spanned several continents. As Flight 447 began its descent toward Jacksonville International Airport, Anna Volkov prepared for the most challenging aspect of her mission. She would need to maintain her cover identity while assisting federal agents in identifying and capturing the smuggling network members she had been tracking. Captain Torres executed a textbook approach to Jacksonville's longest runway, while emergency response vehicles positioned themselves discreetly around the designated secure area. To passengers, the landing appeared routine, but law enforcement agencies were implementing one of the most complex aircraft intervention operations in recent memory. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jacksonville International Airport, Captain Torres announced as the aircraft taxied away from passenger terminals toward a restricted area. Due to the technical issue that required our diversion, we'll need all passengers to remain seated while maintenance crews inspect the aircraft. This process should take approximately 30 minutes. Anna knew that no maintenance crews would be inspecting anything. Federal agents would board within minutes, and the next hour would determine whether months of intelligence gathering would result in successful prosecutions or whether the smuggling network would escape justice due to procedural complications. As the aircraft came to a complete stop, Anna observed the final positioning of the passengers she had been monitoring. The man in the bull's jacket was checking his phone repeatedly despite flight attendant requests to keep electronic devices powered off. The elderly gentleman was organizing papers from his carry-on bag with the systematic care of someone preparing important documents for inspection. The young woman in 22A was exhibiting classic pre-arrest anxiety, elevated breathing, involuntary muscle tension, and hypervigilance regarding crew movements. Anna's training had taught her to read human behavior under stress, and every indicator suggested that at least 3 passengers were anticipating law enforcement contact. The question was whether they would cooperate with authorities or attempt to dispose of evidence and claim innocence. The aircraft door opened, and instead of maintenance personnel, 6 federal agents boarded efficiently. They wore standard business attire rather than tactical gear, maintaining the pretense that this was routine administrative procedure rather than a criminal investigation. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead agent announced, "I'm Agent Patricia Donovan with the FBI. Due to security protocols, we'll need to conduct brief interviews with all passengers. This is standard procedure for aircraft diversions, and we appreciate your cooperation." Anna admired the professional approach. Passengers who were not involved in criminal activity would experience minor inconvenience but would not be traumatized by aggressive law enforcement tactics. Those with something to hide would reveal themselves through their responses to questioning. Agent Donovan approached Anna's seat with the casual manner of routine passenger interview, but Anna caught the subtle hand signal that indicated Donovan was aware of her true identity. "Ms. Richardson," Donovan said, using Anna's cover name, "would you mind stepping forward for a brief conversation?" Anna nodded and gathered her messenger bag, understanding that this was the moment when months of careful preparation would either succeed or fail dramatically. As she moved toward the front of the aircraft, she observed the reactions of other passengers. Most showed mild curiosity or concern about the delay. But the 3 individuals she had been monitoring displayed behavioral responses that confirmed their involvement in criminal activity. The man in the bull's jacket was sweating despite the cool cabin temperature. The elderly gentleman was gripping his carry-on bag as if it contained something valuable he couldn't afford to lose. The young woman was staring at her hands, avoiding eye contact with anyone, classic guilt behavior. In the aircraft galley, Agent Donovan spoke quietly to Anna. "Ms. Volkov, we've been briefed on your operational status. Can you provide immediate assessment of the individuals you've been monitoring?" Anna appreciated the direct approach. 3 confirmed network members. Seat 15F is carrying contraband in modified laptop compartment. Seat 31B has documents that will likely contain shipping routes and contact information. Seat 22A is either courier or communications coordinator, possibly both. "Evidence assessment?" Donovan asked. "Physical contraband in carry-on luggage, digital evidence on personal devices, and documentation sufficient for prosecution if properly handled," Anna replied. Donovan nodded. "We'll need your testimony to establish chain of custody and operational context. Are you prepared to maintain cover identity during initial processing?" Affirmative. Emma Richardson consulting persona can withstand routine background investigation. Deeper analysis will require coordination with my control center. While Anna and Agent Donovan coordinated their approach, other federal agents were conducting systematic interviews with passengers. The process was designed to identify inconsistencies in stories, discover evidence of criminal activity, and separate legitimate travelers from those with alternative agendas. The man in the bull's jacket, identified as Robert Chen, no relation to NATO Director Sarah Chen, claimed to be visiting family in Miami. But when agents examined his carry-on luggage, they discovered a modified laptop computer containing components that appeared to be sophisticated communication equipment rather than standard consumer electronics. "Mr. Chen," Agent Foster said calmly, "can you explain the purpose of these modified components in your laptop?" Chen's answer was immediate but poorly constructed. "I'm in computer repair business. These are spare parts for customer equipment. Agent Foster had 15 years of experience interviewing suspects, and Chen's response exhibited multiple indicators of deception. Eye movement patterns, involuntary muscle tension, and speech rhythm all suggested fabricated explanation. "Which computer repair business?" Foster asked. Chen provided a company name, but when agents verified the information, they discovered that the business had been closed for 8 months. When confronted with this inconsistency, Chen requested legal representation and refused to answer additional questions. Similar patterns emerged with the other suspected network members. The elderly gentleman, identified as Dr. Marcus Webb, claimed to be returning from academic conference, but the documentation in his carry-on bag included shipping schedules, contact lists, and financial records that had nothing to do with academic research. The young woman, Sarah Kim, initially claimed to be visiting friends in Miami, but her phone contained encrypted communication applications and contact lists that included numbers traced to known criminal organizations in 3 different countries. Within 2 hours, federal agents had established probable cause for criminal charges against all 3 suspected network members. The physical evidence, combined with Anna's intelligence reports, provided a foundation for prosecution that extended far beyond simple smuggling violations. But the most significant development occurred when agents analyzed the contraband discovered in Robert Chen's modified laptop. The equipment was not communication devices, it was sophisticated bomb-making components designed to be assembled quickly and deployed in crowded areas. Agent Donovan immediately escalated the case to terrorism task force status. "This isn't smuggling," she informed her command center. "We're looking at potential domestic terrorism incident that was prevented by operational intelligence." The implications were staggering. If Anna Volkov had not been aboard Flight 447, the 3 network members would have arrived in Miami with materials and coordination sufficient to execute a major terrorist attack. Her months of patient intelligence gathering had prevented what could have been a catastrophic incident. As federal agents concluded their investigation aboard the aircraft, Anna prepared for the complex process of transitioning from covert operative back to her official identity. Her mission was complete, but the aftermath would require careful coordination between multiple intelligence agencies. Captain Torres and her crew were debriefed about the security incident, though they would never learn the full scope of what they had helped prevent. From their perspective, routine passenger interviews had identified criminal activity, and professional law enforcement had handled the situation appropriately. The passengers who were not involved in criminal networks were eventually transported to Miami via charter aircraft arranged by the airline. They experienced significant inconvenience but were not informed about the serious nature of the security threat that had been neutralized. 3 months later, Anna Volkov testified in federal court using her real identity for the first time in over 2 years. The 3 network members were convicted of terrorism-related charges and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The intelligence gathered from their communications and documentation led to additional arrests in 4 countries and effectively dismantled an international network that had been operating for over 5 years. Anna's testimony was given in closed session to protect ongoing operations, but federal prosecutors credited her intelligence gathering with preventing what could have been one of the most significant domestic terrorism incidents since September 11. After the trial, Anna met with Captain Rebecca Torres at a small coffee shop in Chicago O'Hare Airport. Torres was between flights on a routine domestic run, unaware that she was meeting with the passenger who had been instrumental in preventing disaster aboard Flight 447. "I never did learn what really happened that night," Torres said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "The FBI debrief was pretty standard: suspicious passengers, criminal activity discovered, case closed. But I've always wondered about the marketing consultant in 12C. She seemed different somehow." Anna smiled, maintaining the Emma Richardson persona one final time. "Sometimes ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. I'm just glad everything worked out safely." Torres nodded. "In 15 years of flying, that was definitely one of the more interesting security incidents I've experienced. Makes you realize how many things happen behind the scenes that passengers never know about." "More than you might imagine," Anna agreed, understanding the irony of the statement better than Torres ever would. 6 months later, Anna Volkov was assigned to a new operation involving suspected weapons trafficking through European shipping ports. Her success aboard Flight 447 had established her reputation as one of NATO's most effective deep-cover operatives. She never flew commercially under the Emma Richardson identity again, but maintained the carefully constructed background as one of several personas available for future missions. In the world of international intelligence, identities were tools to be used when circumstances required, then stored away until needed again. Detective Sarah Martinez in Miami eventually learned through federal law enforcement channels that her instincts about the passenger in seat 12C had been correct. The woman had indeed been more than an ordinary marketing consultant. Martinez never learned Anna's true identity, but her experience reinforced the importance of trusting professional intuition when something seemed unusual. The story of Flight 447 never appeared in newspapers or television news reports. From the public perspective, an aircraft had experienced minor technical difficulties, diverted to Jacksonville, and continued to Miami after maintenance inspection. 3 passengers had been detained for unrelated criminal activity discovered during routine security procedures. Only a small number of intelligence professionals and federal agents knew that a carefully planned terrorist attack had been prevented through months of patient surveillance work by an operative whose existence was known to very few people outside classified government programs. Anna Volkov returned to her apartment in Prague, Czech Republic, where she maintained her primary residence between missions. Her neighbors knew her as a freelance translator who traveled frequently for work. They had no idea that her travel schedule included assignments that helped protect the security of nations and the safety of innocent civilians around the world. In her quiet moments between operations, Anna sometimes wondered about the passengers aboard Flight 447 who never knew how close they had come to being victims of an attack that could have killed dozens of people. She took satisfaction in knowing that her work made a difference, even when that difference remained invisible to those who benefited from it. The calm woman who had maintained her composure while surrounded by potential terrorists had successfully completed one of the most important missions of her career. And somewhere in the files of intelligence agencies across multiple continents, her success was recorded as another victory in the ongoing battle between those who sought to harm innocents and those who dedicated their lives to preventing such harm. The invisible guardians who walk among us continue their work, unrecognized and unacknowledged, protecting a world that will never know their names or understand the sacrifices they make. Their stories remain untold, their heroism unsung, but their impact resonates through the lives they save and the tragedies they prevent. Some heroes wear uniforms and receive medals. Others blend into crowds and disappear into shadows, carrying secrets that will never be revealed and shouldering burdens that will never be shared. Both types of courage are necessary, and both deserves recognition, even when that recognition can never be publicly given. The story of Flight 447 is one of thousands that occur every year, ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, making split-second decisions that affect the lives of strangers, and choosing courage when it would be easier to choose safety. In airports, on aircraft, in cities around the world, these quiet guardians continue their work. Watching. Waiting. Ready to act when action is necessary to protect those who will never know they were in danger. The next time you board an aircraft, remember that among your fellow passengers might be someone whose presence there is not coincidental, whose awareness extends beyond casual observation, and whose skills could mean the difference between routine travel and disaster. They ask for no recognition, seek no publicity, and hope never to be needed. But they are there, maintaining their calm while others panic, making their calculations while others sleep, and standing ready to sacrifice their anonymity when circumstances require heroes to step forward. The calm woman in seat 12C was exactly where she needed to be, exactly when she needed to be there. And because of her presence, 137 passengers and crew members arrived safely at their destinations, unaware that they owed their lives to a stranger whose real name they would never know.